Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast, where we discuss health education and how to best teach health ed in the K 12 setting. Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast. I'm your host, Lori Reichel. Today's topic, we're going to continue the conversation about puberty. The last episode had provided 3 activities to help you talk with children or actually help children figure out the self-management of puberty. Again, I'm a skill-based health educator. So today we're going to talk more about tips for you to teach on the topic of puberty. In honor of that, I am wearing the Puberty Prof podcast sweatshirt that I had on for the last episode also, and that's because there's a lot of episodes with that podcast on basic changes children go through, different topics for the national sexuality education standards. So I had speakers for all of those topics. So I'm wearing that. Feel free, and I'll put a little link about those former episodes for the Puberty Prof podcast. Yet today is going to be for the school health educators, and I have Megan Adams as our guest. Hi, Megan. How are you doing today?
Hi, Lori. Good. How are you?
I'm doing swell. I'm glad that the sun is out.
It feels amazing.
Yes,
Absolutely
it
amazing.
does. There's a lot of us that have experienced a very long winter in which now the birds are singing, the bees are beginning to come out. So it's the birds and the bees season, which is typically when we do have these puberty conversations. So before we start talking about your advice for teachers about that, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm actually a Central New York native, graduated from Oneida High School. So this whole we're just waiting for more snow, I think, because it's going to happen one more time. But
No.
this time of year is always the birds and the bees, and the kids, I think, in my classes get so excited for it. So I graduated from SUNY Brockport with my degree in physical education, said I would never, ever, ever teach health. I only wanted to teach PE, and got married quick. Did some work in North Carolina for Dodea, and then taught pre-K through fifth PE in Texas, which I said I would never do. I would never do the little kids. I wanted the high schoolers. However, they are the most exciting. So I got a huge kick out of that. And then I came back to New York after getting divorced and realized, okay, if I'm coming back to New York, I need to get my master's. And the only people hiring non-certified since I lost my New York State certification were charter schools. And they had an opening for middle school PE and health. And I said, you know what, let's do it. So now I've got my master's from Emporia State online. So that was really helpful because being a single mom, we needed the online stuff.
Yes.
But now it's like health is my huge focus. So I've gone back to community college to take extra credits, extra classes, and that's where I'm at now. So I coach
Wonderful.
girls varsity basketball out there. Like it's kind of this whole big school environment. Like we started this whole program together, and just that development of the kids, I think, has been absolutely amazing.
Wonderful. And I appreciate that you had said, I'm not going to like the little ones, because I sometimes talk with a student teacher who has to do a placement at the elementary school setting. They're like, I'm not liking it. It's like, well, you never know. You might have to have a position like that at first. And there's a lot of benefits of working with younger people. There's a lot. Now, I want to ask you, when we connected through email, and I said, what topics do you want to talk about? You offered to chat about puberty talks. Why?
Actually, so puberty and sex ed are definitely my favorite topic to talk about. And I think it's because it's the most uncomfortable topic to talk about. So when it comes to school, my first year teaching at the current school that I'm at, I put my syllabus out there as instructed, and we had our back to school night. And the single mom came up to me and she had a boy in my class, a seventh grade boy, and he said, Mom, this is the teacher. And I said, what do you mean the teacher? And he goes, the one we have to have for health class. And that mom said, will you be talking about puberty and sex ed? And I said, yes, I will. And she hugged me. And I was so taken back. I said, well, okay, it's nice to meet you. And she said, I have no idea how to have this conversation with my son.
Mm,
And his dad's not in the picture anymore. And that was kind of like the switch for me
yeah.
of we need to really start having these conversations and they need to happen younger. And then my daughter is now 10 years old
Mm,
and it all kind of resurfaced. It reclicked for me. She came home from school one day and my boyfriend said, "Hey, you need to talk to your daughter. We need to have that talk." And I said, what do you mean?" She goes, "She just came up to me and said, I've started my menstrual cycle today
very
and
cool.
I need supplies." And
Hmm.
he was just totally baffled. There was no like panic. It was just such a normal conversation. And I just kind of looked at her like, "Did you got what?" She
Hmm.
said, "Mom, it's called a menstrual cycle." And I said, "Oh, okay. So we're having this talk."
Hmm.
And it's just being with the kids. It's like these are things that so many parents just don't talk about at home. And I don't know if it's just because it's gotten more uncomfortable to talk about, or some of the parents, when I've talked to them, have just said it's stuff we weren't talked about too. Like
Hmm.
nobody didn't have these
Yeah.
conversations. We're not sure where to start with this. So
Hmm.
inviting parents to come into the class while we do this and sharing newsletters with them and just building this momentum for the unit at the end of the year. It's the one the kids get most excited for. And
Hmm.
half the time when I taught middle school, now I'm only high school, when I taught middle school, they didn't even know it was coming. So once it
Yeah.
happened, they all in, like just
Yeah.
completely sold. So it was great.
And it's so important that we have talks. I know some schools they have the talk, and I'm always an advocate to say this isn't a one-time conversation
Oh
because
no.
what a child is thinking today is one thing, yet the next day and the next day, and we have to approach children and start the conversation because it's happening for some people early too. What are some of the tips that you have for teachers to talk about the topic?
So for me, it's being 100% candid. So just being open, being real, and being yourself, because that's how the kids are going to gravitate. If you come up nervous, they're not going to want to talk about it. If
Hmm.
you don't refer to body parts with the correct anatomical terms, they're not going to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. So the utilization of terminology, I think, is like a huge one. The terminology, I think, is super important, but this the being yourself. I've had kids come out and they will ask the most obvious questions. And it's like, well, if you know this was going to happen, then why would you do that? Or, well, what do you mean? Like, why do I have to learn about the girls? Or why do I have to learn about a uterus when I only have penis?
Hmm.
Because I don't split my kids up anymore. So I'm a huge advocate for in that middle school grades, keeping them together. So
Oh,
I work
absolutely.
with fourth and fifth graders and we separate because they
Hmm.
get a little giddy and I only get an hour. So as fun as we can make it all together, when I'm crunched for time, we kind of do need to split up in it and it kind of allows those kids to ask questions, but keeping them in one big setting, despite sometimes apparent pushback or an uncomfortableness, I think is huge because we also need to learn how to respect each other.
Hmm.
Understanding why someone with a penis can't stand up at the end of math class. And we're not there to make fun of him. We have to help them navigate out of there. What do I do if I
Right.
walk by a student and there's a red spot on the back of their pants? Do we
Hmm.
make fun of them or do we offer a jacket? So some of that skills-based talk that you're big into, like we do it too, and we do different role playing in my class sometimes
Yeah.
with, okay, how would you handle this situation if this happened? And
Hmm.
it's easy to text and take photos and to look online for things, but having that real conversation with them, I think is super important. So putting away the technology and being completely present in those conversations, I think is super important for them.
Absolutely. It's funny, you reminded me that almost every time that I talk with young people about this topic, we do process this whole thing of how do you tell a friend, a peer, that they smell?
Oh, I get adults that ask, "Hey, so can you come in and do that talk because they stink?" And I'm like, did we talk about the deodorant again? Because we did that in the beginning of the year. But yes, like how
Mm-hmm.
do we not push people out or how do we say it in a proper way?
Yeah. How do we do? And it's funny because I'll say to the child, how do you think? What would you say to your friend? You stink. And I look at them and I'm like, so me saying you stink, And they're like, no, I don't like that. Yeah. So we talk to our friend and we say, okay, guess what? I'm going through puberty too. And I noticed that I want you to feel awkward around others. I noticed that you're smelling a little bit more. And as a reminder, you can wash your armpits if you're allowed to use deodorant, maybe antiperspirant, depending upon your background and stuff, but to help them out, not to let them be a scapegoat or let them continue to smell. I noticed too, Megan, you use terms like a person with a penis. So is your school supportive of that terminology? Because I know for me, a lot of schools, they'll, like for me, I'll say most children go through this. Most girls will go through this, or most boys for the fourth or fifth grade level. That's typical terminology. And then using the people with a penis, people with a vulva kind of terminology. So I'm just curious about overall, like your school and your practice.
So our school, it took a little bit.
Okay.
It took a little bit. So we were only allowed to call it human growth and development for a very long time. And then I had pushed for it to be sex ed. I actually presented at one of our local conferences on comprehensive sex ed and just
Mm,
putting out there all of the information that we need to, because my first year that we finally combined buildings, so we had a separate middle school and a separate high school. And while they were building the high school so we could incorporate a full K through 12 program, I was very much the, okay, boys have a penis and girls have a vagina, and that's what we do.
mhm,
And we left it at boys and girls. And then when we all combined together, I got to meet some of the high schoolers, and they were high schoolers that I had not taught before. And we actually had 3 students that year that identified as transgender. And I said, hey, I need to have a talk with you. And they're like, okay. And so my bestie across the hall, she's a living environment teacher. She goes, no, 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 this teacher's cool. Like she's got legit questions for you. And I said, how do I change this conversation? Because I didn't have you as a teacher. So what was your experience like in health class?
mhm,
And they were mortified. They were like, it was so bad. We got put on this pedestal. We were told we were supposed to do this, but this is not how we felt. And it's okay, well, how do I make students feel comfortable that are born with a penis and identify as male? And how do I make you feel comfortable if you don't identify the way you were born? And so having that conversation was huge. And I think what kind of just happened was I just started using the terminology, a person with a penis and a person with a vulva. And the kids didn't really pick up on it as much as the adults did. So it's more normalized for those kids. And the school, fortunately, has been super accepting of it. And I think having that culture with students that were transgender, and well, I mean, they are still, it's not something that just goes away, but they're no longer our students. Um, I think having that and them having a voice as well made a huge difference in making this a more inclusive environment. And if the students question it or that it makes them uncomfortable to say penis and vagina, I said, you know what? You guys are not old enough to watch this movie from back in our day, but the health teacher walked in and said, penis, 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 vagina, vagina, vagina. And we need to use the correct anatomical terms. So by saying those words and not necessarily saying, okay, boys, this is going to happen to you, girls, this is going to happen to you, it also encourages them to use the correct terminology.
mhm.
So I had a student, she said, I can't do anything, but I gotta call it a poom poom, miss. I gotta call it a poom. I can't. And I said, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. And so she would do it. And I would have her repeat it until she did it right. She's like, oh my gosh, the person with the vulva. And I said, thank you. That's all I ask. And honestly, it helps them remember too. So when they come to have these conversations, now they're using
Yeah.
correct terminology and they understand what they're talking about instead
Mhm.
of it just being a boy and a girl. It was kind of scary when I taught some high schoolers and they said, that sac has a name.
Yeah.
I said, yep, that's a scrotum.
Yeah.
Ew, why would they come up with that name? And I'm like, did you not hear this? Like, you've never heard this term before? They
Yeah.
said no. And so I think identifying too with the body parts also helps encourage that conversation too.
Mhm. And it's that when we use slang terms, it basically continues to create a barrier in conversation that we can't talk seriously about it. And
Yeah.
these are body parts. We don't have like slang terms for your ear, hearing hole maybe. But why do we have so many slang terms for the area that's covered by our underwear or bathing suits? I get that. Yet there's actual terms that we use that we can talk seriously about it. Or, sometimes we can make a little silly comment or whatever, because it's funny to talk about body parts overall, because even ears could be funny. Do you have any activities that you want to share?
I would love to.
Okay.
So when I introduce this unit, I don't put anything on the board. I don't put my learning targets, my do not, like nothing to insinuate what topic we're about to get into. And so Michael sells these. Hobby Lobby, I think, has them. They're like the photo dividers. They come in this big case, and there's, I think, 12 different compartments in there. And so I made what I called puberty cards. And I did separate them into male, female, and both just for simplicity facts. So while I do verbally use that term, a person with a penis or a person with a vulva, it's it's easier for the kids and it doesn't give away exactly what we're about to talk about.
Okay.
So the activity, each group has a different set of color cards, and they're just told to get into a group of three students. And my classroom actually has four massive tables at C6, so it works out perfect. And I tell them, I put on the board, I said, you have 10 minutes, and the first team to solve all of the cards correctly wins in
Hmm.
categories of cards. And it is a scavenger hunt. So they sit there and they will pull these cards out. They see there's three main topics, males, females, and both. And then they start pulling out cards of all the different things that happen to them during puberty. And just kind of listening to them talk, like, what do you mean body hair? And like somebody will say, oh yeah, because you're gonna get facial hair. And one of the girls will go, well, what does that mean? Miss Adams has a mustache. And I'm like, oh, did I not take care of that yet? Like, oh crap. Okay. My bad. I got to do a derma facial thing. And they're like, well, I have to shave my leg hair. I have to shave my armpit hair. And then they argue about who stinks more. And then they see the terms from the body part and they're like an ovary. And I
Hmm.
figure it out to the best of your ability. And then we'll go through it together. So I really like to trick the kids into like, this is what we're going to do today.
Right.
And it's okay, especially in middle school, to have laughs. I tell them all the time
Absolutely.
when we do fitness gram testing, which I absolutely cannot stand, whoever comes to me after lunch or after breakfast, when we do the curl up test, someone's going to fart. And it's not me being immature. I'm going to laugh because I think farting is funny. And
Hmm.
somebody else is going to laugh. And we're not laughing at you. It's the idea of, we're all here together. And I am very strict on what happens in my classroom stays in my classroom. So if somebody chooses to share a story or something happens, like you fart during the curl up test, that stays in the room.
Hmm.
If you want to go home and tell mom and dad, oh my gosh, Miss Adams made us sort out all of these different cards and you're not going to believe what was on there, that's fine. But do not share the personal stories of other people who are going through things.
Yeah.
There was another activity we did, and I did a whole survivor theme, which took a lot of energy and effort. And I would not suggest for somebody that teaches four different courses like I do. But I had hidden tasks all over the room and they were put into groups. I had their row numbers hanging up. They all had team names. They made team flags and they were solving all of these puzzles to try to identify the anatomical system, the different things that
Mm.
happen to them during puberty, how to handle a situation when you're with other people. And it's so fun to watch the light bulb click. And I
Hmm.
think when you're having fun as a teacher and you're right
Oh
there
yeah.
with them and your hands deep into the activities that you guys are working on, it makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
I love to do escape rooms with the kids. So that was actually our end of the year activity since we usually save this topic until the end of the year. Their assignment was in order to pass health class, they had to escape the room. And
Okay.
I had boxes like with locks on them and chains wrapped around them. And they had to answer all these questions as a collective and work together to solve those. So the more you can do together and encourage them to talk together and work together, I think the more they're going to actually learn and pick up this stuff because it does need to be skills based.
Mhm.
You can't just sit there and have them repeating things that happen.
No.
Like they need to know and
Yeah.
they need to know how to respond and how to work with each other
Hmm.
through all
They
these
need
different.
Yeah, they need to know how to talk amongst themselves, because that's that communication skills. And the more we even have them, read a card and they're like ovaries, they're at least practicing saying it out loud, increasing hopefully their self-efficacy for being able to talk on the subject, and then just connecting with others. And we can work together to figure things out, because it's difficult. Yeah, some of the challenges going through puberty can be difficult, especially with friends. We have social changes and stuff. So that's great that you're interactive. And I have to say, I as a person who currently teaches future health teachers, I always encourage them not to do the lecture based.
I hate it.
Uh,
And the kids
e-
hate it. The
oh
kids
my
hate it.
goodness.
And if you ever
Yes.
struggle with behavior management, that's
Ugh.
probably why. Because kids have the attention span of a goldfish. It's like 10 seconds. And it's not a bad thing. It's just we are now in a society with instant gratification. I
Yeah,
don't need to listen to you talk because I can pull it up on my phone and get the answer in 2 seconds. So if
exactly.
I want them to learn something, I need to buy into it too.
I hear you.
And keeping them busy by even coloring, even doing a coloring assignment,
Hmm.
they get into it. Even in high
Yeah.
school, my high schoolers, like they love it. I have these little notebooks for them. I'm teaching a parenting course this year and child development. The kids pick their own elective. And I gave them a choice of three. It was nutrition, where we were going to actually cook in class and learn different types of diets, different types of eating. And I said, it's not going to be memorizing the vitamins and minerals. Like we're going to cook, we're going to do hands-on, or it was adding on to. So we taught first semester, I did first aid CPR. And I said, so we can now go into an athletic trainer's training. And I will
Hmm.
teach you, like, you can work with the track team and some of the sports teams. And we will talk about different things you can do with them to help them out for injuries, or if they're dehydrated, or if they're overheating.
Yeah.
And I said, or we can do parenting and childhood development.
Mm.
Of my two groups of senior classes, only three people did not like request parenting.
Yeah.
And so this year I printed them booklets. Everything's hands-on. They are into the booklets and coloring and sorting and organizing and asking questions and engaging. So it doesn't matter what level you're at. Our school says we are a quote college prep school, which
Okay.
means we're supposed to be getting them ready for college. What does that mean? Sitting in lecture halls. Pretty sure we all remember anatomy and physiology and
Hmm.
sitting in that giant lecture hall, but we don't ever remember what that content was.
Hmm.
We remember the labs. I remember the hands-on labs and playing with the cadavers
Right.
and playing with things and understand, putting pieces and puzzles together to understand what's happening,
Yeah.
because we're hands-on and our kids don't get enough hands-on at school.
Hmm. Yeah.
They need more. They sit in math class and English class and they don't get recess anymore. And they want to be up, they want to be moving.
Hmm. Yes.
Organized chaos.
Well, as we come to the end of our recording today, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Um, I would have to say that I could share a million things. But you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have to be transparent. You've got to talk to your parents. You've got to communicate with your parents. Let them know what you're doing. Don't be secretive about it, but continue to advocate and continue to push it. So when you learn new things, take a leap of faith and go to your conferences, join your organizations, and be part of
Hmm.
that, because it is scary. It is nerve-wracking to stand up in front of a whole bunch of people and do a presentation. But I have presented at New York State AFERD on depression awareness and suicide prevention, and it was like, oh, and there's maybe like 12 people in there. It wasn't even a big one. It was like the last day of the sessions. So that's when most people have already left. And then I've presented at our local Central North Zone conference, and the entire classroom in this school we were at was just full.
That's great.
And how do you teach this? And I did it on comprehensive sex education. How do you get your
Hmm.
school to do this? Advocate for it and learn more
Yeah.
about it. Don't stop learning, because we're
Hmm.
teachers. Like we can't stop learning.
Yeah.
Answer the kids' questions. They love it.
Yeah.
And it makes you more relatable to them. We do an anonymous Q&A, and the kids think it's hysterical because I will make, we haven't done it yet this year, but I will make a presentation and use Canva and put their questions up in my little logo for Instagram. And I will answer the questions on video to them. I don't
Hmm.
know who sent it. I don't know why they're asking this or what the intention is behind it, but I do know that they're not the only one with that question.
Yeah.
So if
Hmm.
we make it more fun, then it is what it is.
Yeah.
However, I will say as a teacher, do not do that 100% anonymous, because you never know what's going to pop up.
Yeah.
So I tell the kids it is anonymous. I do not look at the names or the email addresses that come in. However, through Google Forms, you can request the emails for safety purposes. I do have to
Right.
put it on there, but it doesn't mean that I look at it unless there's a
Hmm.
need for it. So
That
having
makes
that
sense.
transparency with your students, they know what a mandated reporter is in my class.
Hmm.
They know what they can and cannot say, and they know the process. So they know if they come to me with something that they have an inkling is going to get reported or needs to be reported, they know that it's not a panicked call home to mom and dad. They know the process of how we go to the counselor and how the counselor handles these conversations and who we call and how we do things.
Yeah.
So having that transparency is going to help build that relationship. And I think every admin says, have you tried building a relationship with that student? We're spoiled. Health teachers are spoiled. We have the opportunity to build some of the best relationships with these kids.
We do. We certainly do. And I really, to go back to like going to your state conference, sometimes people are able to go to a national conference. I know there's challenges at times to get there with costs and stuff. Yet check out your state, and thank you for doing presentations at the state one because it's wonderful. Yeah, just a little side note for those of you listening in, you don't get paid for doing that. That's a service.
Hmm.
When you do a presentation, you usually have 70 minutes, and I find even when you have like five people, that was my first. I think I had 5 or 6 people that attended first thing Friday, 8 o'clock or something like that. My first year, they were like top people. They were
Yeah,
fantastic. So you never know who's going to be in there, but even just to go. So thanks for bringing that up and thank you for your service.
it's a blast. It's the best way to give back. Like we didn't get an education for the money. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and eventually I'd like to teach future educators. I would like
Yeah.
to teach future health teachers. So
Hmm.
the more you get up and talk about it, the more comfortable you are, the easier it'll be. And seeing what our kids really need. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, like going to those conferences and presenting at the conferences, you don't have to be a complete expert at what you're talking about because somebody's going to say something that they do. And I always have my notebook and it's like, oh,
Hmm.
I don't do that. Can you share that? And I've
Yeah.
seen you present at conferences. And I think that was like the first time I met you and learned about who you were. And there's a couple other ones that are out there that present all the time on things. And it's like just having those relationships and making those connections,
Hmm.
it's huge.
And having a notebook there to write it down. I've been saying this to like some of my future teachers. Would you write this down? Don't email me in a year and say, "Can you share that with me?" I don't have the time. So I
Not
love
only
that.
that, if
Yeah.
you look at my Google Drive, I don't know. I probably taught it so many times that it's like second
Yeah.
nature for me that I don't need everything. But at
Hmm.
any of the notes and the details, and honestly, like you'll meet some really great people. Like we've created our own file, like our own folder through a handful of us that ended up at the same presentations. Or let's say there's three of them
Okay.
going on at a time and you can't pick which one you want to go to.
Yep.
We would divide and conquer. Okay, well,
Yeah.
can you share the materials from this one and I'll share the materials from this one and use it as a reference folder? I think I still have
Absolutely.
my notebook. So when I was at SUNY Brockport, they made us present at
Hmm.
conference when we were students. Talk about terrifying because you feel like so inferior to all these professionals that have been doing it forever. But I still have like my binders. They used to give you like those trapper keepers, like the
Hmm.
zip up ones, and I still pull them out. I brush the dust off, I pull them out, try to digitize what I can.
Very good. Yeah, I like putting it on pen and paper for sure. Um, Megan, if somebody wants to get in touch with you after hearing today's episode, how can they do that?
Most of
Okay.
the time, it's honestly through social media is the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay.
So I've started an Instagram account called Health Teacher Hodgepodge,
Hmm.
and that's honestly the best way to get in touch with me.
And I will make sure that in today's description, we have contact information so you folks can connect with Megan to get more of her ideas, maybe to share things with her and vice versa. And Megan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you spending some time with me and chatting.
Lori, I appreciate it. I had a really, really good time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So thank you again, Megan, and thank you to our listeners. As a reminder, please follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the schoolhealtheducators.org website. That is a website that I've created to help us put more tools together. There's actually a page about teaching health ed, and there's a list for the skills, the standard/skills, and then as well as content areas like ATOD, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, family life, that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch there. I'm trying to add more over the summer months when I can. If you have anything, send me an email at schoolhealtheducators@gmail.com. And last but never least, thank you so much for what you're doing. The kids need you. We're doing the best we can with the tools we've been provided, and we're giving kids more tools. So thank you for doing that and remaining updated, folks. And I hope you have a great day.
Bye.